Breaking news out of the NFL, where the Las Vegas Raiders have fired head coach Antonio Pierce after his first full season with the team. That's our latest from Jonathan Jones. The Raiders won just 4 games this season, their fewest since 2018. Las Vegas also missed the playoffs for their 3rd straight year.
Welcome to the Put on Waivers Media Group, home of the Put on Raiders podcast and the Student Body Right podcast. This is your place for the best breakdowns and the best insight for those who fight on and bleed silver and black. Now, here are your hosts, Dwayne Douglas and Ryan Holmes.
And welcome, everybody, to the glorious episode of the Put on Raiders podcast. I'm your host, Dwayne Douglas, and as always, I am podcasting on the beautiful shores of the Pacific Ocean. Beautiful day out here in Southern California. PORSPR is my Twitter handle. And of course, Ryan Holmes is with me, and Ryan Holmes is our HOLM22. Little windy today out here today, and that wind kind of pushed out. That was an autumn wind, I guess, that pushed out Antonio Pierce, who is no longer the head coach of the Raiders. He had the awkward press conference yesterday. This morning, while I go to the beach sometimes just to like see the water and just like relax. And so I watched a video of Tom Pelissero and other people from NFL Network talking about his starter jacket and how they had the Arkansas one, the Carolina, the Charlotte Hornets one. The Hornets one was very popular back in the day. So now we can talk real football now. I don't want to spend like the whole show just crapping on Antonio Pierce. So I think we should have like our last words on the former coach of the Raiders. And then we can move on to the next part of the show. What are your thoughts as the Raiders fire yet another head coach?
Yeah, this seems to be a recurring theme under the Mark Davis regime, going back to when he first hired Dennis Allen. It's gotten a little bit more turbulent the last couple seasons since the John Gruden news came down. So ever since they had to move on from Gruden, then you had Bisaccia for a short term. Then they went Josh McDaniels. That didn't work. Interim coach, he decided to go with Antonio Pierce. That didn't work. So I look at it this way. I think strategically, I'll give Mark Davis credit for only giving him a 2-year deal. So he had this window. To me, this always felt like I messed up with Rich Bisaccia, the interim coach who took him to the playoffs. Antonio Pierce rallied the troops. Let's give it a try, like a test drive. And obviously that test drive crashed and failed and burned miserably this year. There were injuries. There was no quarterback. There are some reasons here if you wanted Antonio Pierce to stay, but the NFL is not a on-the-job training. Antonio Pierce wasn't ready for this job. He wasn't ready to lead a team over 17 games through training camp and make the decisions that a CEO-type head coach needs to make and manage the game. Mm-hmm. When the offense, the wheels came off the offense, there's nothing Antonio Pierce could do to fix that. He's not an offensive guy. He ended up firing his offensive staff and promoting Scott Turner, who was in-house the whole time, and bringing North Turner along. When the defensive players started to fall due to injuries and Patrick Graham's defense just basically barreled to the bottom of the league, they were top 5 in most categories, there was nothing that Antonio Pierce could do to help the defense. So, like, if you're not managing the game and you can't help the offense and you can't help the defense, and then you kind of saw him, he never really took accountability for a lot of the things that were going on. It was always someone else's problem or someone else's excuses. And I believe I texted you Monday while I was watching the press conference. Like, he looked mad up there. Like, he hadn't been told anything. He didn't know what was going on. He hadn't met with Telesco. And I think a lot of people ran with that and said, well, he did the press conference, he's back. And I was on the other side of the fence. I said, hold on. Like, giving them a couple days. They're sorting through some stuff. After watching that press conference, I was still believed that he wasn't going to be back. And it turns out he wasn't. Could Mark Davis have moved quicker and just made this decision prior to that press conference? Yes, but let's not act like this is the first time a coach has gone out and done a day after the season in press conference and then got fired later in the week, because that happens more often than people want to admit. This isn't a Mark Davis issue where like the Raiders are a messed up organization because they did this. This happens when you look around the league. Like, there's no rule that says you have to fire the coach from the last whistle of the last game and by 10 a.m. the next morning. Like that, there's no rule that says that. So I applaud Mark Davis for sitting back, for meeting. It sounds like he met with Tom Brady. He met with Tom Telesco, and they made their decision. It wasn't a quick, rash decision. And people are acting like they're losing out on all these candidates because they didn't act at 9:58 Monday morning. Like, it's Tuesday. Let's slow down, people. It was one day. So once a Raider, always a Raider. Wish Antonio Pierce luck in his next position. I want the Raiders to win, and whatever it takes to do that, that's what I'm about. And for me, I'm sad that it didn't work out, but you could kind of see that he wasn't ready for the position, I said earlier. So the Raiders made the decision that's the best decision for the Raiders. Mark Davis listened to the locker room. It didn't work out, and he's trying to correct that problem now.
Yeah, I mean, listen, at the end of the day, like, him having to bring in everybody and their grandmother to help him through this job was really something that I think was kind of a telltale sign. Like, you could see like a guy like Stefanski bringing like maybe one guy like a Vrabel to kind of bounce ideas off as a consultant, but you don't bring in, a family of consultants. You know what I mean? And it still didn't get better. Like, I saw that picture, I saw that image of Marcus Freeman and he had his game management guy right next to him, like just giving him like the information he needed, whatever. Like, that's really what he needed, and like he didn't get that from those guys, and it kind of felt like those guys were just grifters. They were just like, hey, rather than me sitting home, why don't we just go chill in Vegas, honey, and I'll get a check from Mark Davis for a year. Like, you know what I mean? Like, they didn't really help the situation. It's a big job. Like, you know what I'm saying? It's a huge job to be the head coach of a high school team, a collegiate team, a big time Division I program, or an NFL team. It's hard to manage all those things, the personalities of the coaches, and then the players, and then you have to manage emergencies that come up. Like, you know what I'm saying? So and then you have emergencies that he created. Like, I mean, like ML football is always everybody's timeline. But when they tweet something about Antonio, Devontae Adams, you can't like that post. Like, you can like you cannot. That is something that, like, I would expect from like students in a high school. Like, you know what I mean? Like, he had to be, even if you hated Devontae Adams, you can't do that. Like, you know what I'm saying? So like, it was the maturity factor of it. You're wearing the starter jacket, whatever. Okay, whatever, that's fine. You want to go vintage with the jacket. You can't wear a player's jersey to the game. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, and with sunglasses on, like, it's just not becoming of a head coach. And I listen, he had an opportunity that many people never get in a lifetime, and it's hard to be a successful head coach. And he wasn't one. And I will say this, because I don't want to get into the race part of it, but people are trying to get in the race part of it on Twitter. He coached the same amount of games as Josh McDaniels. I mean, actually won more than Josh McDaniels, because he has one more loss than Josh McDaniels did. So like, I'm not sure how you can like look at it as that part of it. I mean, and people who are trying to grift that on the internet, they make it hard for moments where we have to really talk about race for real. Like he got fired because of the time management, the ineptitude of the offense, how the defense looked, how he can't, like, he literally, if you kept him, he couldn't just take the headset away from Patrick Graham and then call defensive plays. Like, you know what I mean? And he's not connected enough to even build the staff. Like, you know what I'm saying? That's why Getsy was here, because Getsy was like, if I get fired, I'll take money for 2 years. Like, you know what I mean? So it's just it was a mess. I wish him luck in what he does outside of football. I mean, or next step, or if he gets a linebacker job somewhere else. I think he is a deserving of a linebacker job, because I think the way Spillane played, the way some of the linebackers played when he was here, they played pretty well for him. So I can give him that part. But end of the day, he's not a head coach, and a lot of coaches aren't head coaches. So I think that's pretty much how we got to sum it up.
I think to the other side of it is, it was a feel-good story. He was one of us. He was a Raider fan. Yeah. He was on the staff. They won 5 games. He got us away from the Josh McDaniels era. But when all that went away, when it was time to coach this team, you can't fall behind in 15 of your 17 games by double digits. You can't lose 9 games by double digits. And you have to beat some decent teams. Like, he was able to beat up at the end of the year last year on a bunch of bad teams with backup quarterbacks, and he kind of did that this year. He got 2 wins late against bad teams with backup quarterbacks. But whenever his team was on the field against quality opponents, outside of the one Chiefs game that they won, it was a fluke because they scored 2 defensive touchdowns in a matter of a couple of minutes. This team was just never really ahead in games. They couldn't put games away. And this team has talent on it. It's missing the biggest piece, which is the quarterback. But let's not act like he was running out a bunch of scrubs. Like, I remember the Dennis Allen Raiders with Shante Spencer playing cornerback and Ronald Bartell and running out those kind of guys. This team had more talent than Dennis Allen worked with. It had more talent than the early John Gruden years. And that was part of Gruden's fault because he traded Khalil Mack and Amari Cooper. But let's not act like he was working with bare scraps here. He won 5 games last year against, as I mentioned earlier, some bad teams. But it'll be interesting to think. I think the biggest takeaway I had today, too, before that was Patrick Graham didn't take the contract extension. Obviously, there's a little bit of bad blood. Something was going on behind the scenes. If he's literally jumping on a lateral move to take a defensive coordinator interview with the Bengals, rather than wait to see what was going to happen with AP and potentially return to the Raiders, like, Patrick Graham was like, I'm not taking this. I don't care what happens this year. I'm out the door. Yeah. And it's Tuesday, and he's taking lateral interviews. Well, when he could have returned to the Raiders if AP stayed, because we didn't know what was going on with AP. That tells me that there was something going on there. And I don't trust Antonio Pierce to hire a staff, let alone an offensive staff and a defensive staff. Mm-hmm. And I don't trust them to coach the quarterback. So and we've talked about this for years on this show. Like, you need to align the organization. The quarterback, the head coach, the GM, they all need to be in alignment. And the worst thing you can do is keep a head coach around for half a season or a season with a rookie quarterback if the Raiders go that route, and then blow the thing off the doors in year 2. So Mark Davis's first mistake last year, and we talked about it, was hire the GM first, let the GM hire the coach. He didn't do that. He hired the coach and then hired the GM. So Tom Telesco did his job for the most part. He got the players in the draft that showed promise on the field. Could he have spent more money in free agency? Yes, but again, I think that's a Mark Davis issue, because it's not like he had a ton of cash sitting around and decided, you know what, I'm not going to spend it. Yeah. I think that was more of a Mark Davis issue. So we'll see. Tom Telesco is not hiring the head coach here either. By all reports from Adam Schefter, Diana Rossini, Tom Brady will be sitting in on these meetings. So the Tom Brady era is underway in Las Vegas. And Tom Brady, as many people said, is going to have a major, major influence on what the Raiders do on the football side. That's clearly going to take place. So I don't know if he's going to be calling playoff games on Saturday and Sunday, and he's in interviews on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. But Tom Brady is now a major, major voice in the Raiders football operation.
So it sounds like Tom Brady is the football owner, where Mark Davis is the everything else owner. Like, you know what I'm saying? So so we'll see how that works out. I did want to mention one thing about Tom Telesco. And I think in the rage of some people who are upset that AP is no longer the head coach, this idea that Tom Telesco, I've been seeing this on Twitter and timeline, that Tom Telesco must go as well. Let's take a deep breath.
They were never a package deal.
Never a package deal. The baby was split. They call that in the industry splitting the baby, when you don't hire the GM and the head coach together. You don't want to split the baby. Like, I mean, you want them to come in together. So like now, I mean, but like clearly, I mean, and like, you know, listen, let's call it like it is. Like, he's an experienced GM, whether we wanted him or not. Like, you want somebody else or not, or whatever. But his top 3 picks are pretty. I mean, like, did Ziegler do anything like that when he was here, or Mayock did anything like that when he was here? Like, those top 3 picks, like those 3
we don't
picks
need to revisit those drafts.
Exactly. we don't want to revisit those drafts, but they just on that alone, he does deserve more time. And maybe he is going to be the guy who does, you know, the bookkeeping. Like, you know what I'm saying? He's the guy who make sure everything is in order as far as the finances go. When Tom Brady wants to make a move on a free agent, or the coach wants to make a move on a free agent, they make sure that, you know, that it can get done. Also in the draft, hey, listen, I got a chance to so and so is falling. We have a deal in place with so and so. Make that deal happen. And maybe that's what he's going to be doing as well. But sometimes let's go with this whole idea that he needs to go as well. Like I think you have to kind of you can't say, yay, we got the best tight end prospect, Hall of Fame prospect in NFL history, and then be like, oh, Tom Telesco got to go too. Like you know what I'm saying? Like you gotta kind of like, come on. He actually I think for not getting a quarterback, he drafted the best possible player that he could have in that moment, and he probably drafted the top player in that entire draft just physically on a lot of people's big boards. So it is what it is.
I will say this: if Tom Telesco doesn't get the quarterback in the next year or two, he's going to be out of a job too. So
anyway, without question,
he has to figure out the quarterback position.
The quarterback clock is on now because you have the best quarterback of all time as your boss, like literally as your boss, and he's gonna demand that. I think if anything else comes from this moment, Ryan, it comes from that, like, I know Tom is not going to sit and just be like, okay, let's ride with AOC. He's not riding with AOC. He's not riding with Gardner Minshew. He's going to demand a real quarterback, a prospect. It could be, I hope it's not Kirk Cousins or Aaron Rodgers. I hope it's something in the draft or something young, or even if they draft a quarterback and then trade for Joe Milton. Like the dynamic of the quarterback room needs to get younger and needs to have more potential than it does right now.
I think I look at it this way. I look at Tom Brady. Now, with his job with Fox, he didn't go to practices and he wasn't diving deep into facilities and getting deep with coaches, but he saw all the players in the league this year. He's been down on the field on game day talking to these guys. He's talked to coaches on the sidelines. He knows what's going on within the league. He has connections that Antonio Pierce can only dream of having. And Tom Brady has those now. This is different than when John Gruden was in the booth on Monday Night Football and returned, because John Gruden was old school. He had his old good buddies network of coaches that he wanted to bring along with him and players that he admired from afar. Tom Brady's in the thick of it right now, like calling playoff games, calling games for Fox. So he knows what's going on the field. He knows what coordinators are good. He's watching tape. He's studying for these by watching film and not going to practices because he's not allowed to do that as a minor earner. So he's in the thick of it. Like Tom Brady knows what's going on and has a pulse on the National Football League in 2024. And I think that can only help the Raiders as they venture forward into 2025 and what seems like a new regime for the fourth time in 5 years.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I'm not, we would like something stable here. I would like to have a head coach and a quarterback together who's been together for 3 or 4 years, and we can see where they go. And maybe like do a show where we're talking about a playoff game. That'd be fun. That'd be fun, right? I haven't done that in a while, so we'll take it from there as far as that goes.
I had a buddy text me today and asked if we would be willing to trade for Mike Tomlin, and I said he hasn't won a playoff game since 2016. No.
He's a
Steelers fan. We were just joking about it, but like,
I would
love for the Raiders to be in the playoffs.
Yes.
That's the goal.
That's the goal. So the attractiveness of the job, we know all the jobs that are open. Some of the negatives is that it's been a turnstile. It's been a turnstile. It's you don't have a quarterback, and then you don't have the clear option to get the quarterback because they won meaningless games down the stretch. Again, I think they were back-to-back years they won one more game than they should have. Where they could have been in range of a quarterback. As far as that goes, what other things are you seeing about the attractiveness of this job?
I think the attractiveness of it, if you're a candidate, is obviously you get to hire your own staff. If you can turn the Raiders around, you're going to get a ton of credit in the national media. Like if you can turn this organization around, you have the pick of the litter if you want to go somewhere else eventually if it doesn't work out down the road. But you get to work with Tom Brady, and Tom Brady's not going to accept mediocrity. And Tom Brady's do everything he can for this organization to win. Yeah, you're in a tough division. You have Patrick Mahomes, you have Andy Reid, you have John Harbaugh, you have Justin Herbert, you have Sean Payton, and whatever Bo Nix is going to turn out to be. But I think the attractiveness is the next guy's going to get time. And I know Antonio Pierce fans don't want to hear that because he's one and done. But if I'm a candidate and I take this job, I want like a 4 or 5 year deal. I want to know that I'm going to have a chance to rebuild this, and I'm not going to get blown out in a year. And I think now that we have, let's call it an adult making the decisions here, and Tom Brady having a big say here, not Mark Davis just flying by the seat of his pants, that hopefully that does happen. That it's not a total rebuild. Like, you got to bring back some of these defensive players, but if they can get the quarterback, they're a year or two away from being a contender, as long as the young players keep developing. Like you said, Brock Bowers is going to be an first team All Pro. Jackson Powers Johnson will be in the Pro Bowl in the next couple of years. DJ Glaze is going to be a starting right tackle for 10 years in the league, and just get another draft class. Get 2 more draft classes on top of that. Bring back Trayvon Merrick, Adam Butler, Nate Hobbs, a couple of these defenders, Robert Spillane, and just start building depth on this roster. They need to attack the offensive skill players in the draft and free agency.
Yep.
They have the money to go out and get some players, but it's going to be a great opportunity for whoever wants it. Now, there's 6 openings, and I've seen a lot of lists today of what they are, and the Raiders' consensus across the national media is it's the 5th best job, only better than the Saints. I would argue it's better than the Jets. And
yeah, it is better than the Jets.
So you're probably in the middle, 3 or 4. I think that the Patriots job because of Drake May, the Bears job because of Caleb Williams, and whatever you think of Trevor Lawrence. So the Raiders are the 3 or 4 as far as attractiveness here. But it's an opportunity to play in a great stadium with a great fan base. The owner's going to get out of the way at this point, it looks like, and just let Tom Pelissero and Tom Brady kind of run this, which is what he's always talked about wanting to do, having that 3-headed decision-making crew. But we'll see. There's some attractive candidates out there. I got a list here of 6 guys that I think should have some interest in. And I think moving forward over the next day or two, we'll start to see who some of these candidates are. Josina Anderson reported that the Raiders have 2 candidates they're really interested in that they actually checked in with yesterday and this morning to make sure what is your availability and are you interested in this job. And when they got back the answers that those candidates would be, that's when they decided to move on from Antonio Pierce. So it sounds like there is a plan here. There are a couple of guys they're targeting. Now, let's hope that they can go out and hire one of those guys.
Yeah. Let's see here. So talk about the attractiveness of the job. So I think it's very important for me, whether it's Tom Brady or whoever, because the NFL has kind of set this up to slow things down, to have, even if you have a guy like Vrabel, who is I think one of the I think a couple of the betting houses have him to be the odds-on favorite to be the Raiders head coach. I still would like, and I know this is crazy talk, a full search where people who are actually candidates who might get hired. I'm not talking about David Shaw. I'm not talking about Pep Hamilton. I'm talking about
Winston Moss?
I'm not talking about Winston. Shout out to Winston Moss, because I love Winston Moss. Was always there for the Raiders to interview back in the day. But all I want is, hey, listen, Flores, Glenn, if Ben Johnson will take an interview, Ben Johnson. I want Joe. I'm not big on Joe Brady, but Joe Brady, Liam Cohen, those guys are there. Let's interview all of these people. So I don't want to satisfy the Rooney Rule the cheesy way. I want to satisfy it by hiring, by looking at people who are actually capable and guys who might get hired this cycle.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is a full search, because we go back to last year and the Antonio Pierce hiring. There was no search.
Yes.
The Raiders interviewed Leslie Frazier, and I don't even remember the other candidate off the top of my head. It wasn't a big name. And then they basically went ahead with Antonio Pierce. They didn't interview John Harbaugh. They didn't even try to interview Harbaugh. They didn't try to interview Mike Vrabel. They didn't try to interview anybody. It was the 2 minority candidates and Antonio Pierce. So I'll give you my 6 and kind of rank them of what I would do. Now, obviously, the first guy on the list is Ben Johnson. I would do everything I could. Ben Johnson is not taking the Raiders job. He's not even going to take an interview with the Raiders. So I'll put him at 1 with the caveat of saying it's not going to happen. He's going to end up. It sounds like he's only accepted interviews with Chicago and New England because there's a quarterback there. And that's how that works. And that's how that works. Is
that? Do you need that to win?
You do. Whatever you think of Caleb Williams, he's the number 1 pick in the draft last year. He's got tremendous ability. You put him in the right system. You surround him with a better offensive line and a really good coach that calls offensive plays. We'll see what happens. So Ben Johnson will be number one with I'll fully acknowledge that I don't think he'd even take an interview with the Raiders. So number two would be Mike Vrabel. Like I would move to Mike Vrabel. There's a connection there, obviously, with Tom Brady. There's also a connection with Richard Seymour, who's also a minority order with the Raiders. And I hate when Vrabel gets thrown into the Patriots way. Mike Vrabel never coached for the Patriots. Never. He played there.
Repeat that, please, because for people in the back, repeat it.
Yeah, Mike Vrabel never coached in New England.
Thank you.
So he coached in Houston and then got the job in Tennessee.
Ohio State too, a little bit too, right?
He's been to the playoffs. He's won playoff games. He can establish a culture. They've had really good defenses during all of his time in Tennessee. Outside of I think 1 year, they've been in the top 15 all but 1 year. The offense was very run centric, play action heavy. He does have a track record of hiring good offensive coordinators. He went 2 for 4. He hired Matt LaFleur when no one knew who Matt LaFleur was, who's now the coach of the Green Bay. The following year, he got Arthur Smith, who got a head coaching job and is now taking the Steelers to the playoffs as an offensive coordinator. The last two, not so good. It was Todd Downing and I believe Tim Kelly was his name that came over from Houston. He never really had a quarterback there either. He was winning with Ryan Tannehill. So that would be my next choice. If he's off the table and it sounds like New England can pounce on him on Thursday once they finish their interview with him, I would then go Brian Flores would be my number 3 pick. Again, defensive-minded guy. He's had a great defensive scheme. He's got basically a no-name defense there in Minnesota. Yeah. They let Daniil Hunter go and got better. I don't know how that works. He doesn't have great linebackers. He's running out the corpse of Stephon Gilmore at cornerback out there. So it's a very blitz-centric. They get after it. They put pressure on the defense. They create turnovers. It's the style of defense I like to watch. Yeah, you're going to give them a play here or there, big plays, but they put the pressure on the offense every play of the game to know who's coming, who to block, and they confuse the blocking scheme. It's not just rush 4 and not get to the quarterback. I think Max Crosby could be tremendous in that kind of defense. And I do think when you start talking about connections and who he can bring with them, I think Josh McCown is going to be a hot candidate. He's already gotten a head coaching interviews under his belt in Tennessee. He's got a request this year. He's the quarterback coach in Minnesota. He's been learning under Kevin O'Connell for 2 years. He doesn't have experience calling plays, but he was a quarterback in the league for nearly 15 or 20 years. I would think Brian Flores will be able to get him out of Minnesota to come with him to be the offensive play caller. I do have some hesitation of what went down with Tua and kind of the relationship he had with Tua when he was in Miami. And it didn't work out very well bringing in a rookie quarterback. But I like Brian Flores as a candidate 2 candidates ago before they hired Josh McDaniels. Number 4, I would go Liam Cohen. Again, not a lot of experience, which would be kind of my holdup here, but what he's done with that Tampa Bay offense, and I saw a stat today that the first time in NFL history a team completed over 70% of their passes and averaged over 5 yards a carry was this year's Bucs team, with basically a rookie running back and Bucky Irvin. They missed. Chris Godwin's been out for most of the season. Mike Evans missed a big chunk of time. He's basically working with Baker Mayfield. It's not a great offensive line, and to be able to do what he did with that offense, and he comes from the Sean McVay tree, so he did grow up and learn one of the most successful offenses, Shanahan and McVay trees. That I think that he could come in as an offensive play caller with a rookie quarterback or a young quarterback, and kind of get the best out of those guys and kind of grow with them. Now you'd have to give him time, but he's a guy that he's an offensive guy. He can help the quarterback, and in today's game, you have to be able to help the quarterback, and that's what he can do. I would go Jesse Minter. This one's kind of interesting. Number 5, Jesse Minter. As far as I know, I don't think anyone's even requested to interview him, the defensive coordinator with the Chargers, who were the number 1 scoring defense in the league. So if you have an opportunity to get a guy that can come in that's a great defensive play caller with a great scheme that's young, that can grow around. Now, I don't know what kind of staff he can put together, so that would kind of be my hesitation there. And, just think about it. If Mark Davis just would have tried to go get John Harbaugh last year and he brought Jesse Minter in, what they could have done with this team. Now, obviously, they didn't have the quarterback that he had there with Justin Herbert, but that's a great staff that Harbaugh was able to put together. And maybe between John Harbaugh and Jim Harbaugh and his time in college, like Jesse Minter could find a way to bring in an offensive coordinator that's innovative and knows the game as we move forward into 2025. It can bring in someone that's not a recycled guy that ran an offense in the 1990s or the early 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think lastly, I would interview him. I'm not sure I would take him, but I think Todd Monken should be on the list with the offense corner. What he's done in Baltimore with Lamar Jackson and that offense this year. And my caveat would be this: if like you can't go get that quarterback, and the Raiders are going to have a tough time getting one, and your options are, and we talked about this on the last show. If you told me right now my quarterbacks in that room next year are Justin Fields, Aiden O'Connell, and Jalen Milroe, give me Todd Monken, because he could put the offense together that Lamar Jackson's running. It's very run centric. They can get the most out of the quarterback and build around that. So if you're going to have that mobile, scrambling guy that's going to be a dual threat with his legs, like Todd Monken's running that offense and has been doing it for a couple of years. Now, remember, he came from Georgia not too long ago. So he knows and was probably recruiting a lot of the guys that are going to be in the draft this year. So he has some inside knowledge that he can bring to your organization. And he's an offensive play caller. He's older. I believe he's in his late 50s. Not the most exciting hire. But I would at least talk to him because you don't know what the Raiders quarterback situation is going to look like as we move into next year.
Yeah.
That would be my list.
Makes
Aaron
sense.
Glenn, I mean, if I could get Vrabel or Flores, I would do that over Aaron Glenn.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. I'll do mine. A different day. As far as and I do like Minter. I am kind of surprised a little bit that nobody has talked to Minter or requested Minter at all. I think they have. I like the impact he's, because we saw that defense play last year, and part of it is health, but they've had some injuries on that Charger defense, and they've been able to.
He has rookie cornerbacks out there.
Yeah, I mean he's been doing a great job. I mean they don't
pick.
They don't miss tackles. They get pressure on the quarterback. Like he's done a really good job, and I like the impact he's made on that defense in year one. I mean that you want to see. Do you want to see a head coach, defensive coordinator with your team to make a impact in year one? And he definitely did that with the Chargers here. Brady. The trepidation that I might have about this pick is this is another situation where the Raiders have, since Mark Davis has been here, right? Was Reggie who had experience. Then we went to, Mayock with no experience for for Ziegler, and now Tom Brady. Now Tom Brady is a lot different because he's not going anywhere. Like, what I mean? He's not giving up those shares of that team. Like, you got shares of an NFL team, you hold that like gold. Worries about, because I do have a worry about him. Like, I think he's definitely a take charge personality. You know what I'm saying? But like, I'm worried about him, like, being in this position for the first time, making some major decisions here. Or is it just going to be him picking the head coach, trying to acquire the quarterback, and then and then kind of getting out the way and letting this thing run, and then you just don't come into the picture unless there's a big decision to be made.
Yeah, I look at it this way, especially in professional sports nowadays. A lot of teams have models, no matter what sport you talk about.
Mm-hmm.
The first pick in any sport and for any team is a collaborative pick. It's not just the GM making the pick.
Yep.
The owner's involved, the GM's involved, the assistant GM, the pro scouting director, the scouts, the amateur scouts, the cross checkers, whoever the consultants are, and they kind of come to a consensus. Now, they don't always agree, but Tom Brady's not the general manager. He's not going to be sitting down there trying to figure out who the nickel is going to be and who's the fifth cornerback and who's going to be the special teams guy and who's the long snapper. His job is to get this team going in the right direction. And we need to hire the right coach, and we need to figure out who the quarterback's going to be. I think that's going to be the extent of it. He may chime in time and time and say, hey, man, like, I like this player. Like, you think we can get the deal done? But when you start filling out the roster and you start going second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth round and moving around the draft, that's Tom Telesco. That's the director of pro scouting. That's the director of college scouting. Like Tom Brady's not sitting in this magic chair and he's going to make every decision. So for him, I think the focus is those two things. Who's the coach? Who's the quarterback? And I would leave it at that. I don't have a problem with that. I think that, we've seen Ken Herrock and we've seen Mark Davis try to do this since 2011. It hasn't been successful.
Is Ken Herrock going to be around this time? I'm not sure.
I doubt it. I hope
I doubt it. I seriously doubt it.
So we'll see. And I expect, by the time this show gets out, hopefully there's a list of 3, 4, 5 candidates they want to talk to. So it's an exciting day. The greatness of the Raiders is always in the future, as Al Davis would say. And we have to believe that as fans. And for us that wanted to see this change, it's a good day. For the guys that wanted to see AP stay, it sucks. But like I said, all any of us want at the end of the day is for the Raiders to win, for the Raiders to get to the playoffs, and the Raiders to hopefully someday, before we die, host another Super Bowl trophy. That's all we care about.
And I think I might just settle for a playoff win at this point. It's getting bad. It's getting rough. It's getting rough. So everybody who texted the show, who just was like, if they keep him, I'm done. I keep him, I'm done. I keep him, I'm done. I'm selling my PSLs. I'm doing all this stuff like that. Hang on for one more second. We'll see if we'll see if AP can if Tom Brady and Telesco and Mark Davis can get a quality head coach in the building. It's gonna be huge to see if that happens. Anything else before we head out?
No, and I would just lean that. I don't think they would have moved. I don't think Mark Davis would have moved off to AP unless they had a plan.
Yes.
Unless they had a target and they knew that it was a realistic target. I don't think this decision was just made this morning and woke up and it was just like, you know what, I don't want him to be here anymore. Let's move on. So we'll see what happens. It's funny. There's always more action in January for Raiders fans and for people like us to make podcasts than there are in September and October. And this is the good part. This is the playoffs for the Raiders fans. Who's going to be the coach? Who's going to be the coordinator? What are we doing in the draft? What's the combine? So hopefully there's a time in the future where we don't have to talk about this stuff in January. We can be a real organization and we can talk about the Senior Bowl or even better, our matchup, who are we playing in the playoffs coming up. But I will say this to close, I know a lot of people out there are talking about, well, the AFC West has 3 playoff teams and the Raiders aren't. They're doomed forever. Just go back to last year. The Chargers won 5 games. The Broncos have been terrible for a few years. The realistic odds that 3 teams from a division will make the playoffs every year are almost slim to none. I can almost guarantee you right now that 3 teams from the AFC West will not make the playoffs next year. It'll be probably 2. So can the Raiders be one of those 2 teams? I don't know if next year is the right time frame, but the Chargers and the Broncos aren't going to be good every year. It's just not possible with the way the NFL's set up. The Chiefs can be because they have the best quarterback in the game, and as long as Andy Reid's there, and the rest are in their pocket a little bit. We'll just say what it is, but they're not going anywhere. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, we'll see. All right, Ray Nation. All right, Ray Nation. We'll take you. See you next time. And hopefully by that time we'll have a coach. If we don't have a coach, we'll go over and kind of go over the candidates as well too. So, all right, Ray Nation. Take care.
All right, take care.
Peace.